Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be looking at the heart of the widow. It's based on a talk that Elder Vincent Haleck gave back in October 2017.
Okay.
And he was speaking to members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But I think what he had to say really kind of goes beyond any particular faith.
Mm.
He uses the story from the Bible, the story of the widow's mite, as a starting point
Right.
to talk about faith and sacrifice. And I have a feeling what he has to say might surprise some people.
It's funny you say that. It's one of those stories that, you hear it, you think, okay, I get it. But what Elder Halleck does is he brings in these fascinating real-life stories from the saints of the Pacific.
Hmm.
And it adds this whole other level to this idea of the heart of the widow. It goes way beyond, I think, what we usually think about when we hear that phrase.
Okay, so I think maybe for people who maybe haven't heard that story in a while or just need a little refresher,
Yeah.
let's recap the widow's mite. So we're in the temple, people are donating to the treasury, and Jesus is there observing.
Right.
And you have these wealthy folks coming up and, giving large amounts.
Mm-hmm.
And then this poor widow, she comes along and puts in these 2 tiny coins, which is all she has.
Yeah, and it's such a tiny amount. Like, if you compare it to what everybody else is giving, it almost seems like meaningless.
Yeah.
But then, and this is what's so cool, Jesus points it out to his disciples, and he's like, no, look, this is the most important gift here because she gave everything.
Yeah.
It's not about the amount. It's about, like, what percentage of her heart she put in.
It really changes how you think about giving, doesn't it? Because we tend to focus on what it looks like on the outside.
Yeah.
How much money, how big the gift is, instead of what's behind it. What's the motivation?
And that's really the point that Elder Halleck is trying to get us to see.
Yeah.
He takes this old story
Yeah.
and he brings it into today's world using these incredible stories from the Pacific Islands. He's really asking, what does it mean to give everything you have in the world today?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of these stories. I know there was one that you mentioned to me earlier that really stuck with you.
Yeah, there's this story of an elderly couple. They live in this small village in the Pacific. And they come in contact with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And, after much prayer and consideration, they decide to get baptized. But here's the thing. Their decision to do so has a huge personal cost.
Okay.
They lose their jobs, their standing in the community, they even lose the support of their family.
Wow. That's a big sacrifice. It almost seems reckless.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, imagine having your whole life turned upside down for something that you're just starting to learn about.
Right.
It makes you think, what was it about this restored gospel that was so powerful, that was so convincing, that they were willing to give up everything?
When you say it like that, it doesn't seem so reckless. It seems more like it was just this deep conviction.
Yeah.
They must have felt like they had found something true to make that kind of leap.
And it wasn't an easy decision. Elder Halleck actually recounts how someone asked the husband about it, how he felt about their decision. And the husband, all he said was, "It is true, isn't it?
Wow.
Our choice was clear." It's a really simple statement, but it says so much about their faith and the certainty that they had found.
Yeah, it's like they were saying, look, we gave up everything, but when you're faced with the truth, what else can you do?
Exactly. And here's the amazing thing. This isn't a story of despair. Their burdens ended up being lightened. They found support within the church. They were even sealed as a family in the temple. It's a beautiful example of how sacrifice can lead to unexpected blessings.
That makes me think about the story of Alma's converts in the Book of Mormon.
Mm-hmm.
They also faced intense persecution for joining the church, but they were sustained by their faith. It's like this theme of sacrifice leading to deeper joy and spiritual growth. It's a universal thing.
I think you're right. It goes beyond any one belief system. It's something about the human experience. When you find something worth sacrificing for, something that makes your life have meaning, even when you're going through hard things.
So what's another example of this heart of the widow that Elder Haleck shared?
Well, he tells this fascinating story about a paramount chief in Samoa. For years, missionaries were forbidden from entering his village. They couldn't share their message. And then suddenly, it seems like out of nowhere, he changes his mind and opens the doors to the church.
That's a huge change. What made him change his mind?
That's what Elder Halleck wanted to know too.
Yeah.
So he asked the chief about his decision. And the chief's answer was so insightful. He said, "A man can live in the dark for a time, but there will come a time when he'll long to come into the light."
There's so much in that statement. It's like he's saying there's this natural human desire for truth, for enlightenment. That eventually wins out, even over the strongest traditions and resistance.
And it wasn't just about him seeking truth for himself. This was a powerful leader. He could have just kept things the way they were, stayed comfortable.
Yeah.
But he chose to put the needs of his people above his own comfort and traditions.
So it's not like he was giving up material possessions like that widow in the Bible, but he was making a big sacrifice.
Yeah.
Giving up his authority, his comfort, maybe even his reputation. He was putting something bigger than himself first.
It's such a powerful example of leadership.
Yeah.
And a different kind of sacrifice.
Yeah.
But it comes from that same heart of the widow place. That willingness to choose something bigger than yourself, even when it's hard.
Yeah. These stories are really giving a bigger picture of what it means to have that heart of the widow. It's not just about money or possessions. It's a much deeper commitment, a willingness to put your values into action, even if it costs you something.
And that's really just the beginning. Elder Haleck goes on to share another experience, and I think you're going to find this one really resonates. It takes place in American Samoa back in 1977. Okay, so picture this. A brand new ward in American Samoa, 1977.
Okay.
99 members.
Wow.
And most of them were just simple farmers and laborers.
Oh.
They get word that a temple is going to be built in Samoa.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine the excitement.
Oh, yeah.
Especially because, as you were saying earlier, traveling to a temple from Samoa was this huge undertaking.
Right.
So expensive.
Yeah.
So time-consuming.
Yeah.
This must have felt like a dream come true for them.
It was huge. A temple in their own land, bringing those blessings of eternity so much closer.
Yeah.
But along with that announcement came a call for donations to help build the temple.
Of course.
The bishopric, the local leaders, they asked members to prayerfully consider what they could give.
I'm already getting emotional thinking about what happened next.
I know, right? Well, get ready, because this is where it gets really powerful.
Okay.
The bishopric, they gather in private to open these donations.
Yeah.
And what they find leaves them speechless.
Wow.
These families, many of them with so little to give materially. They had poured their hearts into their offerings.
Oh, that gives me chills.
It's like that story of the widow all over again. Giving out of their want, not out of their abundance.
Yeah.
Out of this place of deep faith and commitment to something bigger than themselves.
It makes me think, we've been talking about these grand gestures of sacrifice.
Right.
But you're right, it's also about those smaller, everyday acts of giving that often go unnoticed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about shifting our focus,
Yeah.
from what we can't give to what we can give, no matter how small. Maybe it's volunteering our time or offering a listening ear to a friend who's struggling.
Yeah.
Or, even just choosing kindness over judgment when things are tough.
I love that. Yeah.
It makes this whole idea of the heart of the widow so much more accessible.
Yes.
It's not just these incredible saints making huge sacrifices.
Right.
It's about each of us,
Yeah.
in our own way, contributing to something larger than ourselves.
Yeah. What's so interesting is that Elder Haleck doesn't just keep this idea of the heart of the widow in a religious context.
Right?
He talks about it as like a universal principle.
Exactly.
He even asks, where do you see examples of this in your own life or in the world around you? And, when I think about that, I think we see it every day if we're paying attention.
Yeah.
It's the single parent working 2 jobs to provide for their kids, the volunteer at the soup kitchen, the activist fighting for social justice.
Yeah.
They might not be thinking about the heart of the widow specifically, but that's exactly what they're embodying.
Yeah.
That selfless dedication to something bigger than themselves.
I think you're spot on.
Yeah.
It's about that inner strength, that resilience,
Yeah.
facing hardship and still being committed to making a positive impact on the world.
Yeah, and it reminds me of something Elder Haleck said towards the end of his talk.
Was that?
He promised that the Lord will not leave those with a widow's heart wanting.
That's a powerful promise.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to this universal truth. When we give generously, when we really put our hearts into something, we get so much more in return.
Yeah.
Maybe not material wealth
Right.
or recognition, but
Yeah.
it's a sense of purpose, fulfillment, knowing that we're making a difference.
And there's this ripple effect.
Oh, yeah.
When we see someone living with that kind of selflessness, it inspires us to do the same.
Absolutely.
It reminds us that we all have that capacity for greatness, even in those small gestures.
And that leads us perfectly to the end of Elder Haleck's message, where he leaves us with this really thought-provoking question. He asks, what small or big act of faith or sacrifice will you choose to make this week?
It's like he's challenging us
Right.
to really put this idea of the heart of the widow into action in our lives.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be something huge,
Right.
like changing your whole life or anything.
Yeah.
It's about those daily choices,
Mhm.
those small moments where we can choose to just be a little more generous,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
little bit more compassionate or brave.
So maybe it's finally calling that friend you've been meaning to reach out to,
Exactly.
or offering to help that elderly neighbor with their groceries,
Yeah.
or donating to a cause that's close to your heart, even
Mhm.
if it's just a little bit.
Right. And it could even be something as small as, choosing to be patient with a coworker
Yeah,
who's having a hard day,
right.
or giving someone a genuine compliment when they seem down.
Right. Those little things can make a bigger difference than we realize.
Totally. It's like those stories you hear
Mhm.
about those random acts of kindness.
Yeah.
Someone pays for the coffee of the person behind them,
Mm-hmm.
leaves a nice note for a stranger,
Yeah.
or just smiles at someone who looks lost.
Mm.
It's a good reminder that we can all do something,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how small.
It doesn't take a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not just about the impact on other people, it's about what it does for us.
Yeah.
When we act with generosity and selflessness, it makes us more loving,
Right.
more joyful. It connects us to something bigger than ourselves, and that's pretty powerful.
It really is. It's like Elder Haleck was saying, sometimes the most meaningful gifts aren't about the size.
Mhm.
It's about the heart behind them. Like that widow in the temple.
Right.
It's not about what you give, but what it means.
Yeah.
The amount of your heart you put into it.
That's it. That's the heart of the widow.
Yeah.
A heart that wants to give, to serve, to love,
Mm-hmm.
even when it's tough.
Mm.
Finding strength when things are hard and focusing on what other people need,
Yeah.
even when we have our own problems.
I love that. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the heart of the widow, what stands out to you the most?
What really struck me is that it's not about being perfect or some kind of superhero.
Right.
It's about making choices every day.
Yeah.
Those little acts of courage and kindness that add up over time.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being a little more open-hearted, more willing to give even when it's inconvenient or we don't really want to.
And that's something we can all do.
Yeah, we don't have to wait for some big opportunity.
Right.
We can make a difference right now in our own lives with the people around us
Yeah.
just by putting our hearts into it.
Beautifully said. The world needs that kind of everyday goodness,
It does.
that willingness to step up and make things better.
Yeah, even in small ways.
So as you go through your week, think about what we've talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
Look for chances to show that heart of the widow
Yeah.
in your family, with your friends at work, wherever you are. And just remember, even the smallest act of kindness can have a huge impact.
Totally. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It was
Sorry.
awesome to explore this with you.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep learning and growing and keep those hearts open.
And remember, you have the power to make the world a little bit brighter.
That's right.
One act of kindness at a time.